Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the transport ship. Earth looked small from here, just a blue and white ball floating in the darkness. But it was getting bigger every hour. Home was coming closer. Behind him, 24. Other soldiers sat in their seats. Some slept. Others stared at nothing. All of them looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that came from 8 years of war. Jake touched the scar on his left cheek. The plasma burn had healed months ago, but it still felt hot sometimes. He got it during the last big fight at Kepler Station. The bug aliens had almost broken through their lines. Almost. But humans don't give up easy. The Zephyrians looked like giant insects with 6 arms and hard shells. They were smart and mean, and they wanted to take human worlds. For 8 long years, humans fought them across dozens of planets. Now the bugs were beaten. Their queen was dead. Their fleets were scattered. The war was over. Jake should feel happy. He should feel proud. Humans had won, but all he felt was empty. Captain Morrison. A voice made him turn around. Dr. Helen Brooks stood in the aisle. She was the ship's doctor for minds, not bodies. "Can we talk?" Jake nodded and followed her to a quiet corner of the ship. Helen was maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes. Gray hair. She had talked to all the soldiers on the trip home. Some cried when they talked to her. Some got angry. Jake just answered her questions and said he was fine. "How are you feeling about going home?" Helen asked. Jake shrugged. "It's good. War's over. Time to rest. What will you do now?" That was the question Jake didn't want to think about. What does a soldier do when there's no more fighting? He was 32 years old. He had been in the military since he was 18. Fighting was all he knew how to do. "Maybe I'll buy a farm," Jake said. "Grow things instead of blowing them up." Helen smiled, but her eyes looked sad. "Jake, can I tell you about something? There's a new program starting. It's called the Terran Education Initiative." Jake frowned. "Education? Like schools?" "Yes. The war left a lot of colony worlds in bad shape. Millions of children saw terrible things. They lost their families, their homes, their schools were destroyed. These kids need help. Sounds like a job for teachers, not soldiers." "That's where you're wrong." Helen leaned forward. "These children don't need regular teachers. They need people who understand what they've been through. People who know about fear and loss and survival. People like you." Jake shook his head. "I don't know anything about kids. You know about leadership. You know how to make hard choices under pressure. You know how to help people who are scared and hurt." Helen's voice got softer. "Jake, you saved dozens of soldiers during the war. You helped them when they were broken. You can help these children too. That was different. Soldiers know what they signed up for. Kids shouldn't have to deal with war. But they did. And now they need someone who can understand their nightmares. Someone who won't lie to them and say everything is okay when it's not." Jake looked out the window again. Earth was getting bigger. Soon he would be back in his old apartment in Denver. He would sleep in a real bed and eat real food and try to pretend the last 8 years never happened. But the scars would still be there. The memories would still wake him up at night. "Where would I go?" he asked. "New Harmony. It's a colony world that was under bug control for 3 years. We took it back 6 months ago, but the damage is bad. Most of the adults are dead or missing. There are maybe 200 children living in refugee camps." Jake had heard of New Harmony. It was a farming world with nice weather and good soil. Before the war, it was known for growing the best food in that sector. The bugs had used it as a supply base. When humans took it back, there wasn't much left. "The children there have been through hell," Helen continued. "Some don't talk anymore. Some are angry all the time. Some are so scared they won't come out of their hiding places. They need someone who won't give up on them. I'm not good with words, Jake said. I never finished college. I don't know how to teach math or science or any of that stuff. You don't need to teach them math right now. You need to teach them how to trust again, how to hope again, how to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. Jake thought about his own soldiers, young men and women who came to him scared and green. He had taught them how to survive, how to work together, how to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. Maybe that wasn't so different from what these children needed. What would I have to do? 6 months of training on Luna Station. They'll teach you about child psychology and basic education methods. Then you'd go to New Harmony and help set up a school. It wouldn't be easy. The planet is still being rebuilt. You'd be living in temporary buildings, no fancy equipment. Backup if things go wrong. That sounded familiar. Jake had spent most of the war in temporary buildings with no fancy equipment and no backup. The pay isn't great, Helen added. About half what you'd make as a civilian security consultant. But, Jake, this could be the most important thing you ever do. Jake closed his eyes and tried to imagine it. Him in a classroom full of scared children instead of a battlefield full of dead bugs. Teaching instead of fighting. Building instead of destroying. It sounded impossible. It sounded crazy. It sounded like exactly the kind of mission that would end badly. But something in Helen's words stuck with him. These children have only known war. They need someone who understands their world, but can show them something better. Jake had spent 8 years learning how to end lives efficiently. Maybe it was time to learn how to save them instead. If I say yes, Jake said slowly, and I mess this up, those kids will suffer. If you say no, Helen replied, they'll suffer anyway. At least this way, they'll have a chance. The transport ship shuddered slightly as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Soon they would land. Soon Jake would have to decide what kind of man he wanted to be in peacetime. He thought about all the young soldiers he had led, boys and girls who trusted him to bring them home alive. Most of them made it. Not all. The ones who didn't still visited his dreams. Maybe teaching scared children how to be brave again wouldn't be so different from teaching scared soldiers how to stay alive. Maybe the skills that made him a good captain could make him a good teacher. Maybe. It was time to find out. Okay, Jake said. I'll try. Helen smiled, and this time her eyes looked happy instead of sad. Those children are very lucky, even if they don't know it yet. Jake wasn't so sure about that, but he was sure about one thing. The war was over, but his real fight was just beginning. Jake Morrison stood outside the old bunker that was supposed to be his school. The concrete walls were thick and gray, built to stop enemy bombs. Blast marks still showed where plasma weapons had hit during the fighting. This didn't look like any school Jake had ever seen. 6 months of training on Luna Station hadn't prepared him for New Harmony. The planet looked nothing like the farming paradise it used to be. Burned fields stretched to the horizon. Broken buildings sat like broken teeth against the sky. The air still smelled like smoke. Jake pushed open the heavy metal door and walked. Inside, 23 children sat on boxes and broken chairs. They all turned to look at him. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. Most looked like they wished they were somewhere else. Good morning, Jake said. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. I'm Jake Morrison. I'm your new teacher. A boy near. The back laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Another one. How long before this guy runs away too? Jake had read the reports. 3 teachers had tried to work here already. 1 quit after 2 weeks. 1 had a nervous breakdown. The last one just disappeared one night and never came back. "I'm not going anywhere," Jake said. "We're going to make this work." A girl in the front row raised her hand. She looked about 12 years old, with blonde hair and big eyes. But the eyes looked much older than 12. Jake had seen eyes like that on soldiers who had been fighting too long. "Yes?" Jake said. The girl opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She tried again. Nothing. Her face turned red, and she put her hand down. "That's Amy Carter," said another girl sitting nearby. "She doesn't talk anymore. Not since the bugs killed her parents." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. He knelt down so he was at Amy's eye level. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said quietly. "But I'm glad you're here." Amy nodded once and looked down at her hands. Jake stood up and looked around the room. In one corner sat two children who didn't look human. They had blue skin that looked like crystal and 4 arms each. Their eyes glowed soft white in the dim bunker light. "Those are the Kelvin twins," another student said. "They're weird. Their whole family got killed except them." The two alien children moved closer together. Jake could see they were scared. "What are your names?" Jake asked them. The larger twin spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "I am Zev. This is my sister Kira. We are sorry to be here. We know humans do not like our kind. Why would you think that?" The other children say, "We look like monsters." They say we should go away. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. These children had been through enough without him yelling at them. "You're not monsters," Jake said firmly. "You're students, just like everyone else here." A teenage boy near the back stood up. He was tall and thin with dark hair and mean eyes. "This is stupid. When are we going to learn real stuff? Like how to fight? How to use weapons?" "What's your name?" Jake asked. "Danny Phillips. And I don't need some washed-up soldier pretending to be a teacher. I know how to take care of myself." Jake recognized the type. Danny was the kid who solved every problem with his fists, who thought being tough meant being angry all the time. Jake had seen plenty of soldiers like that. They usually got themselves or their friends killed. "Fighting isn't the answer to everything, Danny. It worked against the bugs, didn't it? Violence is the only thing that matters." Jake wanted to explain how wrong Danny was, but he could see the other children watching. Some of them nodded when Danny spoke. They believed him. In their world, violence was what they had seen work. The first week was a disaster. Jake tried to teach them basic reading and math, but nobody paid attention. Amy never spoke. The Kelvin twins sat alone. Danny started fights with other students. 2 younger kids spent most of their time crying. Jake lay awake at night in his small room, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. He knew how to lead soldiers, but these children weren't soldiers. They were just scared kids who had seen too much. On Friday, everything changed. Jake was trying to teach a lesson about history when the sirens started wailing. The sound was loud and harsh, and it meant only one thing: enemy attack. All the children froze. Amy started shaking. The Kelvin twins grabbed each other. Danny jumped up and looked around for weapons that weren't there. "What do we do?" Someone shouted. Jake's military training kicked in. "Everyone stay calm. Move away from the windows. Sit on the floor against the far wall." But the children didn't move. They just stood there, paralyzed by fear. Outside, Jake could hear explosions, plasma fire, shouting. A small group of Zephyrian raiders had attacked the colony. Not enough to take over, but enough to cause damage and terror. "Now," Jake said in his command voice. This time the children moved. They ran to the wall and sat down. Jake sealed the blast door and turned on the emergency lights. The bunker was built to keep people safe. They just had to wait, but the children were scared. Some were crying. Others were shaking. Amy had curled up in a ball. Jake sat down on the floor with them. For the first time since he arrived, he wasn't trying to be a teacher. He was just a man who had been through war, talking to children who are going through the same thing. "I know you're scared," he said. "I'm scared too." Danny looked surprised. "You're scared? But you're a soldier. Soldiers get scared all the time. The difference is we don't let fear stop us from doing what we need to do." Jake started talking. Not about lessons or homework, but about real things. He told them about his friend Peter, who died saving others during a bug attack. About how Jake still had nightmares sometimes. About how being brave didn't mean you weren't afraid. "Did Peter have kids?" asked a small voice. Jake turned. Amy Carter had spoken. Her voice was soft and shaky, but she had spoken. "Yes," Jake said. "A little girl about your age. Her name was Lucy. Does she miss him? Every day? But Peter told me once that if something happened to him, he wanted Lucy to know that good people don't give up, even when things are scary." Amy nodded. "My dad said something like that too." Before the bugs came, other children started talking. About their families, about what they missed, about what scared them. The Kelvin twins talked about their homeworld and how beautiful it used to be. Danny admitted that he acted tough because he was afraid people would leave him like everyone else had. The attack lasted 4 hours. When the all-clear signal finally sounded, Jake opened the blast door. Outside, the colony security forces had driven off the raiders. Nobody was seriously hurt. But inside the bunker, something important had happened. The children looked different. Not happy, exactly, but not hopeless either. Amy Carter walked up to Jake as they prepared to leave. "Mr. Morrison, can we talk like this again tomorrow? Even without the sirens?" Jake smiled. "Yes, Amy, we can talk like this every day." As the children filed out of the bunker, Jake realized something. He hadn't taught them any math or science or history that day. But maybe, for the first time, he had actually taught them something that mattered. Trust. Hope. The idea that they weren't alone. Maybe. That was enough for now. 3 months had passed since the raider attack. Jake's school was finally working. Amy Carter talked every day now, helping younger children with their reading. The Kelvin twins had made friends with human students. Even Danny Phillips had stopped starting fights and begun helping Jake fix broken equipment around the bunker. But everything changed the day the man in the expensive suit arrived. Jake was teaching a history lesson when the blast door opened. A tall man with gray hair and clean clothes walked in. He carried a tablet computer and looked around the bunker like it smelled bad. "Mr. Morrison?" the man said. "I'm Inspector Carl Newman from the Galactic Education Council. We need to talk." Jake's students looked worried. They had learned to be afraid when strangers showed up. "Class, keep reading Chapter 4. I'll be right back." Jake followed Newman outside. The inspector pulled out his tablet and started talking fast. "Mr. Morrison, I've been observing your classes for the past week. I have serious concerns about your teaching methods." "What kind of concerns?" Newman scrolled through his notes. "You're not following the approved curriculum. Your students aren't taking standardized tests. You spend too much time talking about war and trauma instead of focusing on core subjects like mathematics and science." Jake felt his jaw tighten. These children have been through hell. They need to heal before they can learn algebra. "That's not how education works," Newman said. "The Galactic Education Council has standards. These children need to be prepared for integration into normal society. Your methods are keeping them stuck in the past." "My methods are helping them deal with reality." Newman shook his head. "Yesterday, I watched you tell your students about a battle you fought. You described soldiers dying. You talked about fear and failure. Children shouldn't hear such things. Children shouldn't have to live through such things either. But they did. Pretending. It didn't happen won't help them. Mr. Morrison, I understand you mean well, but you're not a trained educator. You're a soldier trying to play teacher. These children need proper instruction, not war stories. Jake wanted to grab Newman by his clean suit and shake him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Have you talked to the children? Do you see how much better they're doing? I see children who are behind grade level and unprepared for standardized assessments. Amy Carter should be reading at a 7th grade level. She's barely at 4th grade. The alien children haven't learned basic human social customs. Danny Phillips shows aggressive tendencies that haven't been properly addressed. Amy Carter couldn't speak 3 months ago. Now she's reading bedtime stories to younger kids. The Kelvin twins were hiding in corners. Now they're part of the class. Danny used to solve every problem with violence. Now he helps other students. Newman looked at his tablet again. None of that matters if they can't pass their placement exams. The council has decided to implement standard protocols immediately. You'll follow the approved curriculum. No more discussions about war. No more emotional processing sessions. Focus on academics. And if I refuse, then this school will be closed, and these children will be transferred to a proper facility on Earth. Jake felt cold. You'd rip them away from the only home they have left? We'd give them a real education instead of this amateur therapy session you're running. That afternoon, Jake tried to teach math the way Newman wanted. He put equations on the board and asked students to solve them. But the children looked confused and unhappy. They kept asking when they would talk about real things again. Amy Carter raised her hand. Mr. Morrison, why are we doing this boring stuff? I thought we were going to read more stories about brave people. Jake looked toward the corner where Newman sat taking notes. We need to focus on mathematics today, Amy. But this doesn't help with anything. When the raiders came, we didn't need to know algebra. We needed to know how to be brave. Newman stood up. Young lady, mathematics is fundamental to your intellectual development. Combat situations are not appropriate topics for academic discussion. Amy looked at Newman like he was speaking a foreign language. But Mr. Morrison taught us that being smart means knowing how to think when things get scary. That's what saved us. Children should not be thinking about scary things, Newman said firmly. You should be focusing on your education. Danny Phillips turned around in his chair. This guy doesn't get it. Does he, Mr. Morrison? He wants us to pretend none of the bad stuff happened. That's enough, Newman said. Return to your mathematical exercises. But the damage was done. The children could see that something was wrong. Their safe space was being invaded by someone who didn't understand their world. The next day was worse. Newman insisted on observing Jake's history class. Instead of teaching the approved lesson about ancient Earth civilizations, Jake started talking about the recent war. He explained why it started, how different species had to work together to win, and what they could learn from the experience. Newman interrupted after 10 minutes. Mr. Morrison, this is completely inappropriate. You're supposed to be teaching about the Roman Empire. These children lived through the most important historical event of their lives. They need to understand it. They need to understand proper historical methodology and chronological analysis. Jake turned to his students. Who can tell me why the Zephyrian War started? Zev, one of the Kelvin twins, raised 2 of his 4 arms. The bugs wanted resources that belonged to other people. They thought they were stronger, so they could just take what they wanted. And what does that teach us? Jake asked. That being strong doesn't give you the right to hurt others, Amy said. And that sometimes different people have to work together to stop bullies. Newman slammed his tablet down. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're teaching them to see the universe in terms of conflict and violence. I'm teaching them to understand the world they actually live in, Jake said. You're traumatizing them further. Danny Phillips stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. You don't know anything about trauma, Suitman. Mr. Morrison helped us understand that our feelings were normal. That being scared didn't make us weak. You want us to pretend we're normal kids who never saw anything bad. Sit down, young man. Why should I? You're going to mess up the only good thing we've had since the war ended. Other students began standing up too. The Kelvin twins moved protectively closer to Jake. Amy Carter, who had been silent for months before Jake arrived, spoke with a clear, strong voice. Mr. Newman, you don't understand. Before Mr. Morrison came, we were all broken. I couldn't talk. Zev and Kira hid from everyone. Danny hurt people because he was scared. Mr. Morrison didn't pretend we weren't damaged. He helped us see that being damaged doesn't mean being useless. Newman looked around the room at 24 children who were standing together, united in defense of their teacher. You're all too emotionally attached to Mr. Morrison. This proves he's not maintaining proper professional boundaries. He's not just our teacher, Amy said. He's the first adult who didn't lie to us. He told us the truth about war, about fear, about how sometimes good people die and bad things happen to everyone. But he also taught us that we could choose what to do next. Newman packed up his tablet. Mr. Morrison, you have 24 hours to decide. Follow the approved curriculum, or the school closes permanently. After Newman left, Jake sat on his desk and looked at his students. They were scared again, but not the broken scared they had been when he first arrived. This was the scared of people who had something worth protecting. What are we going to do, Mr. Morrison? Amy asked. Jake didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. These children had learned to trust him. They had learned to hope again. They had learned that their experiences mattered and their feelings were valid. He wasn't going to let some bureaucrat destroy that, no matter what it cost him. Jake Morrison didn't sleep that night. He sat in his small room, staring at a message on his tablet. The Terran Defense Force wanted him back. A new conflict was starting near the Outer Rim. They offered him the rank of major and triple his teachers. Salary. The timing wasn't an accident. Someone had told the military about his problems with Inspector Newman. They were giving him an easy way out. Jake looked through his window at the bunker that served as his school. Inside those concrete walls, 23 children were probably having nightmares. Amy Carter would wake up crying about her dead parents. The Kelvin twins would huddle together, afraid of being sent away. Danny Phillips would punch his pillow and pretend it was Newman's face. These kids needed him. But maybe Newman was right. Maybe a real teacher could help them more than an old soldier could. The next morning, Jake walked into his classroom, expecting to find Newman waiting with transfer orders. Instead, he found the inspector sitting in a chair, talking quietly with Amy Carter. Mr. Newman, Amy was saying, can I ask you something? Do you have children? Newman looked uncomfortable. That's not relevant to educational policy. I think it is. Because if you had kids, and they saw their mom and dad get killed by monsters, would you want their teacher to pretend it never happened? Newman shifted in his seat. Children need stability and routine, not constant reminders of trauma. Zev, the Kelvin twin, spoke up. But trauma is not something you can put away in a box. It lives inside you. Mr. Morrison taught us that acknowledging our pain makes us stronger, not weaker. Yeah, Danny Phillips added. Before Mr. Morrison came, I was angry all the time. I thought being tough meant hurting people. He showed me that real strength means protecting people. Newman looked around the room. The children weren't sitting in neat rows like students in normal schools. They sat in a circle, facing each other. Some human kids sat next to alien kids. Older students helped younger ones with their reading. "This isn't how a proper classroom should be organized," Newman muttered. "Why not?" asked Amy. "This way we can all see each other. We can help each other. We're not just sitting there being quiet while someone talks at us." Newman pulled out his tablet. "Mr. Morrison, we need to discuss your decision. Will you implement the standard curriculum or not?" Before Jake could answer, the blast door alarm started beeping. Not the attack warning, but the visitor signal. Someone was coming. The door opened and 3 people walked in. Jake recognized them immediately. Colonel Lisa Grant from Terran Defense Command, Dr. Helen Brooks, the counselor who had convinced him to become a teacher, and surprisingly, Director Sam Walsh from the Galactic Education Council. Newman jumped to his feet. "Director Walsh? What are you doing here?" Director Walsh was an older woman with silver hair and tired eyes. She looked around the bunker classroom, and then at the children. "I came to see this school that's causing so much controversy. Sir, I've filed my report. This facility is not meeting council standards. The instructor is unqualified, and the methods are inappropriate." "Yes, I read your report, Carl. Very thorough. But I also received some other communications that concerned me." Walsh pulled out her own tablet. "Yesterday, I got a message from Amy Carter. Do you know what she wrote to me?" Amy looked surprised. "You actually read it, every word. You wrote that Mr. Morrison taught you that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That surviving something terrible makes you strong, not weak. That your experiences matter and your feelings are valid." Newman frowned. Children shouldn't be bothering council directors with emotional appeals. This wasn't an emotional appeal, Carl. It was the most mature analysis of educational philosophy I've read in years. Walsh looked at Amy. "You also wrote that real education means learning how to think, not just memorizing facts." Colonel Grant stepped forward. "Jake, we need to talk. The situation on the rim is getting worse. We need experienced officers." Jake felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Go back to the military where he understood the rules, or stay here and fight a battle he might lose. "Before you decide," Dr. Brooks said, "you should know something. Director Walsh didn't just come here because of Amy's letter. She came because 7 other colony worlds have requested teachers trained in your methods." Walsh nodded. "The traditional approach isn't working for post-war populations. Children who have experienced trauma need different strategies. Your results here are remarkable." Newman looked shocked. "But the test scores, the curriculum standards. Carl, these children couldn't speak or function 3 months ago. Now they're reading, learning, and most importantly, healing. That's worth more than any test score." Danny Phillips raised his hand. "Director Walsh, can I say something?" "Of course." Danny stood up. Jake remembered when the boy first arrived, angry and violent and hopeless. Now he looked confident, but respectful. "Before Mr. Morrison came, I thought the only way to be strong was to hurt people first. I was wrong. He taught me that the strongest thing you can do is help someone who's weaker than you." Zev and Kira, the Kelvin twins, stood up together. "On our world, teachers were respected above all others," Zev said. "They were considered the builders of the future. Mr. Morrison is a true teacher." Amy Carter walked to the front of the room. "Mr. Morrison, I know the military wants you back. And maybe fighting in space seems more important than teaching kids in a bunker. But you saved us. Not from bombs or bullets, but from being lost forever." Jake looked at Colonel Grant. She was offering him everything he used to think he wanted. Respect, good pay, a clear mission with definable objectives. Then he looked at his students. Amy, who had found her voice again. The Kelvin twins, who had learned to trust humans. Annie, who had channeled his anger into protection instead of destruction. 20 other children who had learned that their pain was valid, but their future was still unwritten. "Colonel Grant," Jake said slowly, "I appreciate the offer. But I already have a mission." Grant nodded. "I thought you might say that. The offer stays open if you change your mind." Director Walsh smiled. "Mr. Morrison, how would you feel about training other teachers? We want to create a new program based on your methods. Teachers who understand trauma and healing, not just academics." Newman looked defeated. "What about standards? What about proper procedures?" "We'll create new standards," Walsh said. "Standards that actually help children, instead of just making administrators feel good." Amy Carter walked up to Newman. "Mr. Newman, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you care about kids too. But you care about the idea of kids, not real kids like us." Newman looked down at his tablet full of charts and test scores. Then he looked around the room at children who were happy and learning and healing. "Perhaps I've been measuring the wrong things," he said quietly. 6 months later, Jake stood in front of a different classroom. This one was on Luna Station, filled with former soldiers who wanted to become teachers. Amy Carter sat in the front row. She was 16 now and had passed her early admission exams for teacher training. "The first thing you need to understand," Jake told his new students, "is that every child who walks into your classroom is carrying invisible scars. Your job isn't to pretend those scars don't exist. Your job is to help them turn those scars into strength." A young veteran raised her hand. "What if we can't help them? What if they're too damaged?" Jake thought about Amy, who couldn't speak, about the Kelvin twins, who hid in corners, about Danny, who solved everything with violence. "There's no such thing as too damaged," Jake said. "There are only teachers who give up too soon." Amy Carter smiled and took notes. In a few years, she would go back to New Harmony to teach the next generation of war-torn children. The cycle would continue. Broken people helping other broken people learn how to be whole again. Jake Morrison had spent 8 years learning how to end lives efficiently. Now he spent his days learning how to nurture them effectively. It was harder than any battle he had ever fought. It was also the most important victory he would ever win.